the difference between a slogan and a story. Right now, it's in vogue to say that Democrats have a messaging problem. Maybe they do, they probably do, but that's for candidates and strategists to figure out. That's not the media's problem. The media suffers from a different dilemma, the slogan versus the story. Slogans are simple. They are seductive. Infrastructure Week is a slogan. It's a cheeky one. It became a punchline for years and years, but it's just a slogan. The story is about what all the infrastructure money, what all the funding will do. The story is about the rebuilding of these roads and bridges and of the expansion of broadband. Infrastructure Week is just a slogan. We need to know about the story. There's a GOP slogan out there as well. The bill is a monstrosity. This is a slogan Republicans are using to attack Democrats. But the story is that the last Republican president promised to pass an infrastructure bill and failed, so now they need the Democrats to fail too. Stories are complex. Stories have historical context. Slogans erase all of that. Parents' rights is a slogan. You know, it's this catch-all term. We've heard it constantly ever since the result of the election in Virginia. But which parents? Whose rights are we talking about? Here's another slogan. Critical race theory has become a slogan. An actual, interesting academic term has become a slogan. It has become a catch-all phrase used to demonize, to weaponize. And of course, the activists who tried to make critical race theory into a national story, into a national slogan, they knew what they were doing. They were trying to create a boogeyman, and it worked. Stories make you think. Slogans make you stop thinking. If I could teach a media literacy lesson in the wake of the elections this week, it would be about trying to tune out the slogans and get to the real story. The real stories are often complex, they're messy, they're complicated. That's what makes them interesting. Slogans, we could do with less of those. Let's talk about the last week of coverage and what's coming up this week with Claire Atkinson, Chief Media Correspondent for Insider, Nicole Hemmer, Associate Research Scholar at Columbia University, and Natasha Alford, Vice President Digital Content and a Senior Correspondent at The Grio. She's also a CNN political analyst. So Natasha, let's start with you. Analyzing what's happened in the past few days here, the aftermath of the election and where the Democrats go moving forward. The Democrats probably do have a messaging problem. Okay. But what's the media's problem? It's a different issue than what the Democrats may or may not have.
I think the media has a problem with trying to answer big questions by our deadline versus
interesting. Okay.
versus, how life actually plays out. I think we also have a problem with taking slogans that were designed by political campaigns and parties with an agenda and being unintentional carriers of their agenda, right? So we say,
give me an example.
Well, what is parents' rights? And I saw this great tweet by Jemele Hill where CBS asks, when is too early to talk about race? And Jemele asked all of her followers, well, when was the first time you dealt with racism? And there were thousands of tweets, many from Black people who were saying, when I was like 4, when I was 5. So the framing is off here. We're talking about when is too early, when for an entire demographic, this is reality from the day that we are born, right? So who are we talking about exactly? So I think, again, the larger point I'm making is that we fall into this trap. We're manipulated and we repeat the phrases, right? Trying to answer the questions that the critics put out there to intentionally derail the public dialogue.
Nicole, how do you see this?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that the other failing is a failure to inform. I mean, there was a recent poll that came out that showed that 57% of people had no idea what was in the Build Back Better bill. And some of that is on readers and consumers of media, but it does suggest that there's been so much sloganeering, so much talk about horse race politics, so much of a spotlight on people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, but not enough attention is being paid to actually informing people about what's in this piece of legislation.
But hold on, isn't that the politicians' fault? Isn't it on the Democrats to explain what's in the bill?
Democrats should explain what's in the bill, but don't you think that journalists have a role to say what's in this bill that's about to be passed? I mean, the big problem with Democrats is not saying what's in the bill, it's telling a story about what's in the bill, right? Connecting with people emotionally about what's in the bill. But it does seem like journalists have a role on the informational side of things.
Right. And Claire, this has to do with different forms of media, doesn't it? Right? Television news versus deep dives on digital that are behind subscriber paywalls. Sometimes if you're just getting free or cheap news that's on the web, you're not getting the substance, you're not getting the in-depth reporting.
That's right. I mean, I do think all politics is marketing, and there's a reason for that. It's about appealing to a broadest range of people as you can. TV news is about explaining very complicated topics in very short segments. That in and of itself creates problems in that you can't explain things because the viewer is going to go off and the ratings are going to go down if you get into the weeds of things. We've seen Fox News be able to appropriate complex issues, portray them in very black and white terms, and create very compelling television, whether it's about CRT or it's about Parents' Bill of Rights or fights between school boards and groups of parents on these issues. So, I mean, I think it's fair for the news media to kind of look into what is happening in schools and what does CRT mean and what are kids being taught in schools. And I don't think it's just Fox News that is looking at that issue. It's also Barry Weiss, the former New York Times correspondent. It's former New York Mag correspondent Andrew Sullivan. They're also asking these questions about what is fair when it comes to accusations of racism and how CRT is applied in schools.
Yeah, let me say how I feel about this, and tell me if y'all disagree. It seems to me there's obviously very real issues. We all know it. Every parent knows it with involving schools in the era of the pandemic. Real issues about learning loss. Real, authentic issues about school board and curricula. But then there's also this apocalyptic narrative that comes from right-wing media, including Fox, that is out of proportion, that is exaggerated. Seems to me, Natasha, both are true, and you can see it in the way CRT has been redefined. Critical race theory is a real thing. It's a real thing. It's taught in colleges. Academics study it for a living. But now that phrase has come to mean something very different in our political ecosphere.
Yes, and what's interesting is that so many of these debates are old.
Oh.
they're just rehashed, right? When I was a local news reporter, some of the most intense stories were school board meetings, and they were about busing kids from the city into the suburbs. So these are America's issues with race and identity, and this sort of this moral outrage that just gets repackaged for a new era. So hold on,
you're saying when the top issue is called education, the top issue is race.
It's actually race, and it is our job as journalists to provide that historical context so that our readers just don't take that headline and say parents' rights, and then it becomes this debate about what the people with the agenda actually want us to debate versus this larger picture that we're aware of and we should know about.
It also seems like there's a lot of frustration, discontent among Democrats with the media right now. I see Senator Brian Schatz on Twitter saying the media needs to catch up to the story of the economy. The economy is really steaming back. I see a lot, Claire, of criticism from like rank and file progressives saying the press does not really understand what's in the bill, is not taking it seriously, is not celebrating Biden's wins. Now, it's not our job to celebrate, but we do need to provide the proper context for what's happening. How do you view coverage of the economy right now?
I think we forget that people experience the economy not just through the media, but their own experience. And we are absolutely not here to be promoters of the Biden agenda in any way. We're supposed to be questioning it. So that's the first role of journalism. As you said, context is everything. There are some wins. But people go out, they listen to headlines about inflation, they see supply chain issues being brought up time and time again. They go to restaurants and they pay more, they wait longer, and they see staff shortages, and that's how they experience the economy as well. So I don't think you can put all of that on the media.